welcome everybody to your Wednesday morning live. I've got my cup of ambition. I've got Justin Wells. I've got Ian Boyd. I've got James Hayden is going to be joining us here today. Thank you for being here. This is Inside Texas's YouTube channel powered by InsideTexas.com. We invite you to join us over there. There's a lot of great stuff going on. In fact, we had some really surprising news last night, some very good news in the D-tackle room. We are getting a visit on the last home game of the season with Kentucky from a prospect that is currently committed to LSU. Would you want to tell us a little bit about that, Justin?
Yeah, we reported last night that Zion Williams is expected on campus. We reported it after he called LSU to tell them he was coming on the visit. He talked to Coach Bo last night. After the report, he had another handful of LSU coaches call him and reach out, handful of high school coaches call him and reach out. He put out an innocuous tweet. But from what I can gather this morning, there's still an expectation that he's going to be there. And LSU on their side, they think he's still going to be there. They understand that it's going to be a battle. But ultimately, we won't know a lot of these guys until Saturday morning. I mean, we're at this time of the year where you're going to hear a lot of back and forth. A lot of these schools they don't want their commits to visit, so they're going to do everything they can. But LSU still has an expectation that Zion will be coming. He told me last night that he's still coming. Just hang on tight because it's going to be a roller coaster, fellas. Enjoy the ride.
We are playing our final regular season home game this weekend against Kentucky. I know, Ian, you have been all over this in terms of just breakdowns and predictions a little bit without actually getting into a score prediction. But if you could give the fans at home, the listeners, the people here today, kind of the 30,000-foot view, what do you expect? I guess let me phrase it this way. What do you want to see from Texas? And what do you expect to see from Texas?
It'd be nice to see them solve all their problems and just smash Kentucky. I don't care though. You just win this week and solve your problems for A&M. Like if there are plays that Sark has in the bag that would make beating Kentucky really easy, but would also help against A&M, just try to save them. I would actively flirt with danger in this game.
Right.
And just see if you can get by. I kind of wonder if that's Sark's mentality, because when a coach says something like this is the biggest game of the year, about a game that's obviously not the biggest game of the year, you can tell he wants his guys to play with a certain level of passion and intent that he knows is not going to be easy and that he knows is not going to be aided by the game plan, Right. So I don't care. Quinn could be the worst Quinn we've seen all year, as long as he doesn't commit turnovers and lose against Kentucky. And I don't care, and it doesn't matter. Just win and get by and get right for Texas A&M. And even if they lose to Kentucky, I still don't know if that ruins the season. I think really? a 10-2 Texas with a win over A&M is actually in pretty decent shape for the playoffs because they eliminate A&M.
Right.
And so the field of teams that they have to get by on the resume is lower. And I think a win over A&M on the road actually looks better than the reverse, which would be, a win at home against crappy Kentucky and then a loss on the road at A&M. So all that to say, I have very low expectations. And if it's not, I may be a little bit alarmed if it's not a bit of a struggle.
I see. And do you equate that struggle to our play or the defensive play of Kentucky?
Well, they're pretty good. Their defense isn't bad. As Sark had noted accurately, Kentucky tends to play up or down to their competition. So if Texas is a little bit sluggish or a little bit sloppy, that's fine. I don't care. Ideally win. Other than that, whatever.
Where do you land on that, James? Because even though he does it in a very calming, subdued way, Ian just brought a pretty vicious hot take, which is essentially we could lose to one of the worst teams in the SEC, and still make it to the playoff, considering the biggest knock against Texas is our strength of schedule.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think to his point, you could just look to Ole Miss. They basically did exactly that. They lost against Kentucky at home. Horrible loss. That was Kentucky's last FBS win, actually. Since then, they've only beaten Murray State. But their next best game was at Tennessee, right? They covered the spread on that one, only lost by 10. But, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you had to pick between the two, if you're taking a 10-2 Texas, ideally – you would rather have that win against A&M. As embarrassing as that loss at home would be to Kentucky. But, Kentucky's got some guys out. That spread is 20.5 for a reason. I would hope we'd see a similar game that we saw against Florida, but you never know with Kentucky. Like we just alluded to, that game against Tennessee, that game against Georgia, and that game against Ole Miss, obviously. So Kentucky, being probably the only Kentucky fan you'll ever talk to that's covering Texas sports, it's a down year for Kentucky, to say the least, but they still have NFL bodies. They've got guys like Deion Walker, Dumas Johnson. They've got a solid secondary, and then on offense, you got to look out for weapons like Dane Key and Barry Brown. I mean, they can break some, but again, what I just said 30 seconds ago, they haven't won an FBS game since September. Their only win is Murray State. So I don't see it in the cards personally, but yeah, I would like to see Texas run the ball, get Quinn in rhythm, and ideally have him, break that 300-yard mark like he did against Florida, and just get back into the swing of things, ideally, since Arkansas kind of threw a wrench in their tires there for a second.
This is the game before the game, some people are saying, and as such, there might be some surprises. What Ian wants is just a win, which I think is totally reasonable. But if you disagree or think you want to put your money where your mouth is, we invite you to go over to the Game Time app. So especially if you are looking to get some tickets to this thing. It's the last definitive home game of the season is on Saturday. That is the regular season game. So use the Game Time app to secure your tickets to Texas versus Kentucky. Download the Game Time app or go to gametime.co. That's really important. Gametime.co, and see all the ticket options. Game Time makes it easy to find the best deals at Game Time's transparent all-in pricing feature. It gets rid of those annoying hidden fees. And if you're a fan of pro sports, you can find seats to the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL too. Just use the promo code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But with Game Time, your tickets are guaranteed to be on time and authentic. And on top of that, if you find a lower price anywhere else, Game Time will make up 110% of the difference. So get the Game Time app or visit gametime.co today and use the promo code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. All right, James, you are here for a very special reason. You are our conduit to the fan base. And something that you've been doing recently, which I think is a lot of fun, is you've been asking the fans for their bold takes. And what I would love to do is let's just go over a couple of those right now. And I'd love to I've not seen these. I know Ian and Justin has not seen these. So what I would love for you guys to do is I want you guys to just rate these. 1, this is not a bold take at all. It's pretty obvious, right? 5, this is the craziest thing you've ever heard in your life. So let's start with the first one here, and I'll let you read this one off, James.
So the first one, this is obviously coming from a Georgia fan. Personally, I think this is why a lot of people do not like them. They already beat us, but now they have to prey on our downfall and hope that we lose out and the Dogs win it all. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just start us out with a scorching 5. I think that is extremely bold because that would include Texas not only losing to Kentucky, who I mentioned has only beaten Murray State in the last 2 months. Then they would have to lose at A&M, which I just doubt they're going to drop both of those. And the Dogs winning it all. Carson Beck had one good game this past weekend against Tennessee, but aside from that, he's thrown the most interceptions in the last 5 games in FBS. So I give this a fiery 5. The odds of this, I do not think are very likely, in my opinion.
Ian 478 Hayes is asking or saying that Texas loses out and the Dogs win it all. Where do you land on that? Does that make a lot of sense to you, or the craziest thing you've ever heard?
Can I get an explanation of the scale? Is that a 1?
Absolutely. So 1 is, you know what? That's actually a pretty decent take. 5 is, that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's like boldness. Like one is like saying, if my hot take was Texas is going to beat Kentucky, that's not really a hot take. 5 is like, that's not going to happen. You're insane.
I'm going to go 4.
Okay.
I think Texas losing to both A&M and Kentucky is not that great. If they do lose both of those games, they'll play in a bowl game, which I assume is included in this. And then you get Arch trying to put on a show in a bowl game and Sark trying to put on a show with Arch to recoup fan enthusiasm after the season. So I don't think those are likely. The Dogs winning it all is possible, pretty possible. Also, not a sure thing.
Justin, we're going to go to you, and our very own Texas Homer has helped us with this scale, stating that 3 is oddly, I'm okay with it right now, but if you say it again, I'll fight you. So you do have some options here. 1 obviously being that's a pretty good take. 5 being it's insane. 3 is, you know what, that may make a little bit of sense, but I'll punch you in the face if you repeat it.
I'm going to go with 6.
Sweet. Sweet. I think that's enough said. We can move on to the next element here. So let's look at this next one here. So, calling out straight out the gate. This is a super hot one. We'll go with you first, Justin. Is this this is what the goal was at the beginning of the season. The take here is national champions. What are your thoughts on that, Justin?
2.
All right.
2. It's a good take, but don't you start. It's a good take, but I wouldn't give it a 1 necessarily. But I mean, that's the expectation, and knowing the season this year, that is, I'm going to go with a 2 there. I don't think that's too off the charts, but at the same time, there's a little boldness to that, just because we don't know what's going to happen in the next month and a half.
Where do you land on that, Ian?
2.5.
Okay, great. Good.
It's not a 3, but I don't know if it's a 2.
So he's going
James,
process route style.
Where are you landing on this one,
I'm going to go with a 3. If you had asked me, 4 or 5 weeks ago, I would give that, a 1. But with the way Texas has been kind of iffy and the inconsistency of Quinn and wondering if he could make that big play, I mean, I think you worry about stuff like if they say drop a game at A&M, which is, the trappiest of trap games on the road. That is a scary one before, they're at the top of the SEC standings before what would be an SEC championship game. That's going to be a really hard game. And then if they lose that one, they'll probably have a road playoff game. But I think just what we saw against Georgia and the fact that Michigan and Oklahoma ended up being a lot worse than we expected, I did that one like kind of in the middle. This team obviously has the Jimmies and Joes to win a national championship. It just depends on if they can put it together and how the execution is going to be. Running game stuff. Before the season, that was obviously the expectation. When you lose a guy like CJ Baxter, we're seeing that as the weeks go on has affected the team more than we might have thought. It's just a little tweak here and there, but I give that a 3. I think it's like right in the middle. It very well happened. They could very well lose in the second round. We'll see.
Some of you are throwing some pretty hot takes in the chat, and I want to give us an opportunity to respond to those. So let's give this one more. So this is from Gerald Hopkins, and he says, if Quinn plays inconsistent along with the injuries to the running back room, it will eventually be too much weight on the defense's shoulders, and they get bounced in the first round of the playoff. Now, there's a lot of caveats there, Ian. Outlining what needs to happen in order for them to lose that first round of the playoff. Where do you land on this? Is this a reasonable take, or is this completely insane?
It's a 2 or a 3. I don't like the part where they lose in the first round. There's a lot of variables there. Like, for one, they have to make the playoffs. I think they will. But then the first round, Quinn could be his worst Quinn, and they could still just smother like a BYU or a team like that.
I will say right now, they would get that bye, and it's projected they'd play either Indiana or Ole Miss, is what it says in the.
No, they'd have to win the SEC championship for that.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to say a 3, just because there's too many variables that go into that to draw a first round matchup that they lose. Maybe a 2.
Where do you land on this one, Justin? There are a lot of caveats in this take.
Yeah, I mean, this is the injuries to the running back room, if that was going to be an issue, we would have seen it in September, not late November. That's the injuries to the room are no longer a relevant take. We've seen what Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner, and Jarrett Gibson can become. If Quinn keeps playing inconsistent, is pretty spot on. That you don't know what you're going to get. You really don't. But I don't think the defense. I don't think anything the offense does at this point is too much for the defense. I think this squad is really, really solid. Maybe the best in the country, top to bottom, playing at a very high level. So I'm going to go with a 2.5, 3 on this one. Like you said, there's a lot of different variables in this statement, but this assumes they get to the playoff, which, hey, that's the good news.
James, where do you land on this one before we go to the chat?
I'll give this one a 2, just because there are so many factors to that. Like, say, if Texas wins the SEC, which I was assuming in the current projections, which is also a big if in this 2024 season. I think if let's say they drop one, whether it be the SEC or an A&M game, and they're a 5 seed or something like that, I don't expect them to lose in the first round. And like Justin said, this defense has shown, particularly against Georgia, they really only gave up one drive. They were given the worst lot of cards in that game, and they still played a heck of a game. They've given up 300 yards, over 300 yards once in the season. So I think the defense knows its role and is not really too affected by the offense at this point. The running back room, we'd like to see a little more elite play from there, but we're going to have a guy at least at or around 100 yards a game. So I give this one a 2 because there's just so many variables. And I also think that the defense can at the very least carry them to the semis.
From the chat here, Ian, we've got, and I want to throw this one at you and see what you think. And this is really fun for me. We've got a senior day. So Kentucky, the last home game of the regular season is our senior day. And AR is throwing out there that Jade is going to have a pick 6 on senior day. You buying that one or selling that one, Ian?
I mean, I'll buy. Barron has been such a good Longhorn. Dutifully played nickel when that did not help his draft status. Moved to corner to help his draft status and has been just an absolute stud out there. Major reason for Texas's season and number 1 ranked defense. To specifically get a pick 6 in a given game is, this kind of long odds, but
it's a prop bet.
Let's give Barron. Let's just have faith in Barron because as a reward.
Oh, that's nice. I like the reward aspect of it. So let me move on to another one here, Justin. This is for you, and this is from Mr. Gaddis here. My hot take is that Quinn shreds it from here on out and leads us to the Natty. How are you feeling about that? We're gonna move over to James. James, what are your take on this? Is Justin deals with rubble?
I actually like this one. I'll give it a 2.5, like right in the middle, because I think we could just as well get the Quinn from Ann Arbor that we saw earlier in the year, manipulating the pocket, moving around well, because we've seen over the past 2 years, we kind of know where he's at. He's kind of inconsistent, is particularly off injuries and gets a little bit rattled. I think he's just in one of those spots where if he puts together 2 good games, you could see Quinn get hot again and be, throwing passes like he was in Tuscaloosa last year and earlier in the year against Michigan. What do you think, Justin?
Well, why didn't the Florida game reverse that?
Yep.
Well, I think that's just because it was a one-off game, right? And then he immediately goes into Fayetteville and didn't quite have the flashiest game. He, missed a couple shots on the deep ball, but he was just kind of, again, inconsistent would be the word, iffy. But against Florida, he looked, he played probably a B-plus game, and that was the best game he had played, I'd say, since coming off the injury. I think if, let's say he goes and shows out against Kentucky, he just needs to get his confidence back, in my opinion. He needs to feel like he's that. When he started the season out, he thought, I'm QB1 in this class. And now I think, fan noise, injuries, whatever it may be, he's also just looks shaky out there. I know his footwork hasn't been great. His pocket presence hasn't been great. But I don't think there's any reason we couldn't see Quinn, be a guy who could put up 303 touchdowns on offense, in a playoff game. he's done in the past, right? I mean, I don't think he's going
I
to
feel
be
like 303 touchdowns would be a record of some kind.
No, he's
That's
done,
a lot
he's
of
done
touchdowns.
that 3 times, brother.
300 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Right. No, that makes way more sense. Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Here's the hot take for Quinn to summarize all this. He is who he is. This is who Quinn Ewers is. Sometimes he's on, sometimes he's off. Sometimes he's hurt, sometimes he's healthy. That's the consistency, is the inconsistency.
Yeah.
Quinn is what he is. You set him up in an ideal situation, Texas will thrive. Not everything's going to be ideal. That's what scares you about Quinn, because when things do turn sideways, Quinn turns sideways. I'll say all that with the Florida game was almost spotless. The Arkansas game was exactly what Arkansas wanted. You're going to see a lot of the 3 high safety. They are daring teams to run the ball, do shallow cross, a lot of curls, a lot of stuff underneath. Quinn is who he is. It's all going to be dependent on the game in the moment. If it's ideal, like Kentucky should be, I think he'll shred. If it's hostile and troublesome, like what College Station's probably going to be, you're going to see the Quinn that you see there. This guy's in his 3rd year, fellas. He is who he is. We see good stuff. We see bad stuff. If you're a Texas fan, just go to mass and understand, hey, you need the good stuff for about 4 or 5 more games.
Well, to that, I'd say it also depends very much on Sark's game plan. Because, like, he walked into Tuscaloosa, and I'll be honest, I was one who did not see that one coming. Well, I can't remember what the point spread on that game was, but that was just a perfectly crafted up game plan that silenced the crowd on a hostile road environment. It just depends. Like you're saying, I think he probably needs a good game against Kentucky just to get the mental there. And then Sark, obviously doing what Sark does, would set him up perfectly to tee off against A&M if they have the right game plan.
Casey has a point here, LC.
Go ahead.
Do you see it with Casey here on the comments?
Oh, sorry. Let me bring that down.
Okay, so Casey's saying that this is a myth. Sark does not believe it's a myth. Matthew Golden does not believe it's a myth. And Quinn Ewers does not believe it's a myth.
Wait, I can't see the comment.
I know. I'm waiting for him to pull.
Oh, there we go.
No, that's not it. Go back.
I hate this myth.
There we go. Yeah.
If it's a myth, then it's not a myth to Quinn. It's not a myth to Sark, and it's not a myth to Matthew Golden. It's not a myth to Trey Wisner. We asked these players about this defense, and that's why I think teams see why Sark in Texas sees it so much, because it does hinder what Texas wants to do. Now, does it force them to do other things that they're really good at? Yeah, Texas is very versatile in that regard. But there's no myth. Sure, you can throw a deep on 3 high. You're also going to jump up your interception percentages as well. So do you want to take those chances, or do you want to do what Texas does? Don't turn the ball over, nickel and dime them, get your touchdowns when you can, play good defense, and come out with a W.
For those of you in your car on your way to your parole meeting, I hate this myth that you can't throw deep on the high 3 look. There is constantly open guys there, but we just don't see them or can't hit them. That's what Justin is referring to as we go through this. And I know Ian has a thought on this.
I kind of both right. Justin's right that defense is designed to hinder those deep shots, especially the way teams played against Texas. That said, Texas has gotten open looks against it pretty consistently and then missed them.
Yes.
Not a lot.
No, maybe 2 or 3 a game.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And they miss them. So that part is still.
Arch probably doesn't miss those, but then again, Arch those bombs. So.
All right, we are going to move over into our we're going to look at the schedule. We're going to look at the SEC games coming up. But before we do that, I want to hear from our final sponsor of the day. For those of you that might need any help, let's say you've been in an accident or you maybe had a little slip and fall, this is the person we want you to call. This video is brought to you by Andre the Lawyer. If you're injured, trust the team that secured millions for their clients and helped thousands of Texans with their injury case. Car wrecks, slip and falls, 18-wheeler accidents, on-the-job injuries, and wrongful deaths. Don't let insurance tell you what your claim is worth. Hire Andre the Lawyer to fight for you. Principal office is in Dallas, but they serve Texans throughout the state. So don't wait and call Andre the Lawyer today at 214-444-8808. That's 214-444-8808. The contact information is in the description. Okay, guys, we got it. Yes, sir.
I don't think I've ever heard wrongful deaths in such that tone before.
Yeah.
Like it's dulcet in all its ways. But I
really
gotta tell you, like it makes it almost soothing.
For some of us, it might be, Justin. For some of us, it might be. Let's look at the schedule, and we're going to go in, obviously, we're going to go in chronological order. Again, leaning into the East Coast sports bias. All these times are listed in Eastern. We are going to start off with Ole Miss at Florida. Now, Florida, you'll remember, recently played Texas. They are not having the best of seasons. Florida has, let's put it this way, Ole Miss is 1-2 when it doesn't throw for 285 yards. But the good news is Florida has allowed that many yards in 3 or more times against Georgia's Carson Beck, Miami's Cam Ward, and our very own Quinn Ewers. The other thing to know is Jackson, his name has an X in it. Dart has hit, it was hitting about 71% of his passes for over 3,400 yards and 22 touchdowns and 4 picks. So they are flying at the moment. I'd love to get your thoughts on this one, Ian.
I actually didn't realize that Ole Miss had to finish in the swamp. Or I guess it's not the finish of the year, but boy, that's maybe trouble. DJ Lagway has been outstanding. Did you guys see he came back the week after Texas on that hammy and was dropping bombs? Dialed in. That was really impressive. I probably it catches up to them this week, though. Ole Miss has a very good, very consistent defense. And I just don't. Yeah, I'm with Blake. I think Florida might give them a scare. I'll tell you what, if Ole Miss loses that game, then the Texas can lose to Arkansas. Just don't lose to A&M. Goes up another level.
Justin, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm with Ian in the fact that, honestly, I mean, Ole Miss's defensive front is just it's really good this year, and I think that's what's actually the most consistent part of that team. They almost mirror Texas in a way. Their offense can be inconsistent, but their defense has been solid. Their defense has been sturdy, and so obviously at a different level, Florida's playing with a lot of confidence right now. DJ Lagway is playing with confidence. This is a trap game to me for Ole Miss, because they're already envisioning the playoff and possibly getting into the SEC championship if possible. I know that's still a little bit far out, but they're playing really good right now, but so is Florida. I think this is actually going to be a pretty good game, but I think Ole Miss's defense is just Ole Miss's defense is going to do the same thing to Florida that I think Texas's did. Obviously, they didn't face Lagway. That's going to be a little bit different, but I like Ole Miss here just because I think their defense is the most consistent part of their team. Which is funny because it's an offensive-minded coach, but they're leaning on their defense this year. James,
anything to add to this one?
Yeah, I mean, you would think on paper this would be a trap game, but Florida is in the hundreds on big plays given up, plays of 20-plus yards, and Ole Miss is second in the country in big plays. So it's a morning game. You don't have to worry about that swamp, nighttime atmosphere, like scary thing that you typically have to deal with. I think this could mirror similarly when they walked into Arkansas. Not nearly as much of a beatdown because they've got DJ Lagway back. When we played them, there was no Lagway, so that significantly affected the point spread. But Ole Miss, let's see here. Ole Miss is favored by 10.
Yeah, the line is 10. Over-under is 55.5.
I would say they win by 2 touchdowns. I mean, I just don't think it's going to catch them off guard. They've had time off. And Florida in the morning is not as scary. Florida's coming off a big win. The odds that they go back-to-back, Florida's been competitive, but Ole Miss is really firing on all cylinders and probably, aside from South Carolina, the hottest team in the SEC right now. So I like Ole Miss to win and cover that one. Their offense is finally clicking, and that defensive front, as you guys were talking about, is the best in the country.
The next noon game is going to be UMass at Georgia. You can watch this one on the SEC network. Georgia is, of course, very famously 8-2, and UMass is their bookend at 2-8. The one solitary bright spot for UMass is they are currently 5th in the nation in pass defense. That's great. Georgia also has Georgia Tech next. So this could be an overlook game for UMass, or for Georgia rather, and it probably won't matter. The line on this one is 42.5 with an over-under of 55. So if you do that math, they're suggesting that most of the points are going to be on the Georgia side there. Anything of consequence you're thinking about with this game, Ian?
If the English had brought their Bulldogs, the Minutemen wouldn't have done nothing back in 1775. Am I right, Justin?
Amen. He's
right. That moves us on. That moves us on.
Also, this is a game where if Marcus Camby is healthy, I think it could be closer. But if he's out, man, this is going to be a blowout.
I feel like some people are not going to know who Marcus Camby is, and they're
that's what Google's for.
Okay,
that was Calgary's first NBA player. I remember him.
I will say on Georgia, watch for whether or not they keep throwing to their tight ends.
Oh yeah, Lawson, Lucky, and Delp finally. And
they finally started throwing to their tight ends last week.
Yeah,
and they are a potential championship team. No, the Minutemen would have actually shot the Dogs. Would have been fine.
Okay,
they couldn't load those bullets fast enough when the English Bulldog just comes over you. I'm telling you, it's a slobbery, disgusting mess.
Yeah, it lick them to death.
I think if you were to reread the transcript of that sentence, you might blush a little bit, Justin. Let's move on to UTEP at Tennessee. Tennessee is coming in at 8-2. UTEP again 2-8. Game time is at noon. ESPN Plus. So UTEP is coming in with a relatively well-rounded offense. Their pass game is hit and miss, but their running game is also terrible. So they're very consistent all the way around. They do have a defensive line that is pretty decent, and they'll be playing hellbent for glory. So my guess is here you're probably going to get at least a couple of sacks, maybe on third down, if there are any third downs for Tennessee in this game. But what are your thoughts straight out of the gate here, James?
What's next?
Yep, nope, fair enough.
My buddy played at UTEP, actually. He transferred there from TCU. So I am aware of how bad UTEP is. I don't think this one will be worth watching. They're 2-8 in the Conference USA. So
don't doubt the Fighting Scotty Waldens. Don't doubt those guys.
I guess it'll be like if Tennessee just puts up balloon stats like they always do against bad opponents this year, and then how real is that offensive success? We'll probably find out next week when they hit at Vanderbilt. That's an in-state rivalry and more competitive than it's been in years.
You can make an argument that UTEP is the worst job in college football in terms of location relative to recruiting, because it's so far away from the actual talent hubs of Texas that everybody else has a better shot. And then the local area is just not
a lot of elite schools in El Paso.
That didn't stop Don Haskins in Texas Western
from beating Kentucky.
I think he had some other advantages that are
athletes. You can bring them to the Paso. It's not
a willingness to integrate before everyone else. If UTEP are the first to employ the Elon Musk's robots, then they might have some upset wins until everybody else also starts fielding robots. But other than that, I don't think so.
Robot recruits are coming.
If they start doing Neuralink in the UTEP players, they might take the next jump.
That could do it.
It's good to know the show has stayed on track and not taken a turn. We are now going to go to we're going to skip the Texas-Kentucky game because we've got a whole show dedicated to that tomorrow in our roundtable. So let's look at Wofford and South Carolina. These are some very high-powered games going on this week in the SEC. So South Carolina is coming in at 7-3. Wofford is 5-6. Now, Wofford, the good thing about South Carolina is they've been starting very slow. So if Wofford can come out of this tunnel like a musical theater kid going to Wicked this weekend, they have a chance at it, right? So Wofford has outscored teams 50-34 in the first quarter. So that first quarter could be a little bit fun and maybe fill some hope for Wofford. But I don't see much going on there. You got anything for this one, Ian?
Are you going to see Wicket this weekend?
My tickets are purchased. I'll be going at 6:30 tomorrow night.
You see, it's Wofford.
Is that
That's
a
how you
movie?
pronounce it?
They've been in the tournament in basketball before.
I know, but I've never heard it pronounced before. So I was in my head, it was Wofford, which makes sense.
Actually, I think it is Wofford.
I thought it was
Aren't
Wofford.
they dogs too?
I think it's Wofford. I've only ever heard of it in basketball. I swear everyone calls
Wofford sounds better to me. I don't know.
If we need to change the enunciation, I'm all for that.
It's not like many people are saying the name in general.
Wow. All right. Oh, shots fired. Okay.
Wofford community.
It's on ESPN Plus. That's all you need to know.
Let's move over. So we've got Louisiana Tech at Arkansas. This is the Razorback Stadium. Arkansas again 5-5. Louisiana Tech is 4-6. Now Arkansas is 0-4 when they rush less than 130 yards, and Louisiana Tech has allowed more than 130 yards, rushing 4 times. So similar records here in some ways or another. What do you see this being, Justin?
Yeah, this is a game. Sonny Cumbie needs to get bowl eligible. There's some whispers around there that he may not be the guy, and we're big Cumbie fans. I think he's a tremendous coach and person, and so this right now is another one where Arkansas is just going to beat them just because of the size of the O-line and the D-line and in the method that they use, just ground and pound, hold the ball, but La Tech's got some motivation. They know one more win is a bowl win. That helps Sonny keep his job. And also it's to watch out for John Simon Jr. He's a freshman wide receiver whose little brother James Simon is committed to Texas class of 2025.
We've got a super chat in here that I want to get to. Thank you, AR, for the super chat. Again, these $5 go toward the Toyota Sienna Fund for Ian Boyd and his brood of children. The question here is honest question. Why do some SEC teams play lower tier schools late in the season while Texas stays in conference play once they begin? My answer to this is that schedules are made years and years and years in advance. And I'd be curious to see if this trend holds as Texas stays in the SEC for a longer period of time. You're shaking your head, Ian. Hit me with it.
I do not think it will hold because the SEC is going to impose a 9-game conference schedule on their own members. A lot of the teams don't want it for obvious reasons. Like Arkansas, you'd rather play La Tech and get bowl eligible than I think they're bowl eligible anyway, but in another year, you'd rather play a La Tech and get bowl eligible. And then your coach can say, hey, we went 6-6, we went 7-5. Pay no attention to that SEC record behind the curtain. Right. But the way football is going, it's just not going to work to allow them to do that. The expanded playoffs means that these protected schedules and SEC buys where you play a nobody before you play your rival at the end of the year, it's gone.
Yeah. I mean, the Big Ten's already had 9 conference games. And to what he was saying, it's Texas, we got ours when we played, UTSA, UL Monroe, Colorado State. So it's just their schedule's different. It's not that we're playing any less cupcakes than them. But the SEC famously always has that November Wofford game or Woe Forward game.
Now, Ian, the working man here is suggesting that maybe Texas should play Miller Welding School of Jacksonville. Now, they also run a 3-high defense. How do you think Texas would do against Miller Welding School of Jacksonville?
Is that actually a place?
I don't think so.
I think they'd probably do pretty well.
Well, welders are blue-collar guys. It might be tough. That's going to be they're going to be 3-high of linebackers.
Yeah. It's like when you play the School of Mines and they never jump off sides.
They said coming in at 4:15, we've got Missouri at Mississippi State. Mississippi State 2-8, Missouri 7-3. Mississippi State will do everything to win this one, and Missouri will probably keep it conservative and run it 40 times. The line on this is pretty close, actually. It's 7.5 with an over/under of 57.5. What are we thinking here, Justin?
Yeah, so Missouri is probably the worst 7-3 team in college football, and Mississippi State is the type of team that's going to hang with you. They'll do a few things to keep it close. This is going to be a rock fight. I feel like this is not going to be that much fun of a game to watch. We're going to be in the middle of covering Texas and Kentucky, so my level of care is very low. But anytime you can see Missouri continue to get knocked down, that also hurts Texas A&M's strength of schedule because that's their biggest quality win as of this point. And so that's my take. Mississippi State's good enough to fight and stay in that, especially at home. And it's the SEC. You just never know what's going to happen. But man, this is going to be a giant rock fight.
This is Ryan Nelson brings up an interesting point here about Shane Beamer, someone I'm a fan of. He's building a high-level program and can't wait to see UT play in Columbia for a night game. That will be electric. I mean, what are your thoughts just in general here on the trajectory of South Carolina and what Beamer has been able to do, James?
I mean, they're only ascending. I doubted them because, following Kentucky, it seemed like Kentucky had taken a step ahead of South Carolina. And then all of a sudden they popped off an 8-5 season a couple years ago, upsetting Clemson. And that was really what started it for Beamer. Now he'll get us 5-star here and there. That freshman DN this year has been insane. Nick Harbor was a high recruit and Morris Sellers was a 4-star. And they really believed in that kid. They thought they had their guy, and he proved it last week. Was probably his best game of the season. So I just think players love him. He's recruiting the state well. As Dabo has kind of plateaued and lost that elite status, it helps him in in-state recruiting. And they've got heavy investment in the program. So they're doing the NIL well. They're recruiting well. And he's only assuming they beat Wofford or Wofford, wherever you're from, they'll be 8-3 going into Clemson, right? And they could pull another upset like they did a couple years ago. They're a 9-3 team. They're surging, right, as a program, as a team this season. I would not want to play there. And Bryce Williams Stadium, that's probably the most underrated night atmosphere in the country. That is a tough place to play. But yeah, South Carolina is doing great on all fronts. Good for them, good for Beamer. He's a likable guy. He's really fun to watch. Their team's cool. Yeah, I like it.
Best D-line. I've had multiple SEC coaches tell me they have the best defensive line in the SEC.
That LC, there's a fun parallel here, or tangent we can go on, which is that I believe, I may be mistaken, but I believe that Oklahoma chose Brent Venables over Shane Beamer to replace Lincoln Riley when he betrayed them. And it looked like when South Carolina went into Oklahoma in Norman earlier this year, it looked like Shane Beamer, he called that game and approached that game as though he had been turned down and he wanted to show them the level of mistake they had made. Also, if people didn't know, if Brent Venables had said no to Oklahoma, do you know who else was on their list?
Kirk Signetti.
No. Dan Lanning.
Oh man! All right. Well, we
also further down the list than Brent Venables.
Was this when Dan Lanning was already at Oregon?
No, this was when Dan Lanning was at Georgia waiting for the big job. He absolutely might have taken that Oklahoma gig if they had offered it to him, but they went with Brent Venables instead, which is a shame. It is weird that South Carolina has not a consistently good program. I don't know. They just don't have the same investment as the rest of the SEC for whatever reason, but it's still that's like the birthplace of the Deep South. All the demographic advantages that are there for all the Deep South SEC schools should be there for South Carolina. It's why they routinely have amazing monstrous athletes on their team, like a Lenore Sellers or these defensive linemen, many of whom were low 4-star, high 3-star kids out of high school. It's weird that they can't be consistent as a program.
We've got moving into the later games here. We've got a game that I'm sure Ian might want to talk about, and this is there we go. This is Alabama at Oklahoma, 7 p.m. start. The Tide are 2-2 when they're kept under 400 yards. Oklahoma should maybe make things a little bit uncomfortable for Milroe, but OU's offense remains as effective as an ashtray on a motorcycle. So the line here is 13.5 for Alabama, the over-under being 47.5. Ian, any thoughts on Oklahoma? I know you don't follow them much.
I wonder how invested they are for this game. Seriously, prayers and thoughts for the Venables family. Brent Venables' wife had surgery recently for cancer, in the last couple weeks.
My God.
He's also he's dealing with that. Probably very small prospects of being fired and otherwise having to totally overhaul that team in the portal and hire an offensive coordinator all in the next month. So this is a lot. It's pretty crappy situation. I do feel bad for Venables, not for Oklahoma so much. And they could probably catch Alabama by surprise if they came in and really inspired. But you wonder how much like fight and focus there still is for Oklahoma after they lost their good chance at a bowl game in the Missouri loss. So we'll see.
Any thoughts here, Justin?
Yeah, take the points.
Yeah.
Take the points.
That was my thought as well. James, anything to add before we move on to the A&M Auburn game?
Yeah, I mean, I just think Alabama's found their identity. Oklahoma doesn't have one. That was a huge win for Alabama, running all over LSU. I just think it's a bad spot for Oklahoma. You know, their only win, since the Auburn game is Maine. So I just think Oklahoma's trending in all the wrong directions, and Alabama seems to be one of the hotter teams aside, from Ole Miss. Alabama's really found their footing.
Moving on, we've got the Texas A&M and the Auburn game. Now, the Tigers are 4-0 when they rush for over 150 yards and 0-6 when they're held under that. So, but they have run for 177 yards or more in all of their wins. Texas A&M is 0-2 when allowing 198 yards or more, and 8-0 when allowing fewer. Now, one thing that we need to understand is that A&M has given up 7 turnovers in the last 4 games, and Auburn plays a little bit cleaner than certainly A&M does. The line on this one is only 2.5, with the over/under being 46.5. Now, I know that you posited earlier, Ian, that A&M could lose this game potentially, and that would add even more pressure to the A&M game that Texas plays at the end of the season. What are your thoughts?
Does it add more pressure? I guess it does in some ways. To me, the most there's 2 ways that this could go for the Aggies historically. If they beat Auburn on the road, then they are for sure going to blow it against Texas because the Aggies can't have nice things. And if they blow it against Auburn, look out, because those are the circumstances where they would absolutely be a spoiler for Texas. Does that make sense?
It does. What you're rooting for A&M in this game from a psychological point of view, essentially.
I think so. Well, I mean,
if A&M wins, it looks better if Texas beats them in 2 weeks as well.
I don't think you ever root for the Aggies necessarily.
Fair enough.
But this is just, these spiritual energies are something to be aware of. The odds of A&M winning both of these games in a row are not good. So if they win this one, then you can feel more confident that they will blow it in College Station.
Ian, you got some crystals back there or something talking about spiritual energies?
There is our very own Texas Homer says the best thing that we can hope for is a dominant Auburn win because they struggle to handle success. And I think that's basically what you're saying. Is that right, Ian?
A dominant A&M win, right?
No.
He said dominant Auburn, probably like A&M beating Auburn.
He clarified it with a later comment. A dominant A&M win.
Yeah.
Great.
I think me and Homer are simpatico on this issue, but we do use the same spiritual advisor. So,
is it Andre the lawyer?
Yeah. Of course.
Okay, great. Justin, any thoughts on this A&M Auburn game before we move on to the final game of the night?
Going to Auburn in late November, I don't care how bad they are, man. Crazy things will happen to Jordan Hare. You keep those guys in the game. You talked about how A&M's turned the ball over in the last 4 games. Auburn turns the ball over a lot, but they're just a team that seems to creep up, play to their competition. I think if A&M wins, that makes the Texas win in College Station that much better, especially from a strength of schedule standpoint. So, but it's a field goal on the road, which means it's a push, which means Vegas doesn't know who's going to win. And if Vegas doesn't know, we dang sure don't.
Yeah.
Final game of
wait. Sorry, before we move off A&M, can you pull up this recent Gaddis comment?
Yes, but you get goaded so easily. All right, here we go. For the people driving to their grandmother's house, I tend to disagree with Ian. If they will have, if they win, so there we go. If they win, they will have everything to play for, including including beating Big Brother. There will be a short-lived demoralization if they lose to Auburn. I got to get these fonts bigger. Okay, go for it, Ian.
I don't think C. Gaddis understands the psyche of the Aggie, which is that they always they're like the dog chasing the car. They always long for that big come up moment where they're vindicated and their whole ethos is finally revealed to the rest of the world to not be a cult, but to in fact be our proper overlords and oligarchs, right? But then in the back of their minds, they know it can't be, right? And so that's not how it works for them. Them getting that up for a game means that the what's the SEC shorts, the battered Aggie syndrome shirt, battered Aggie syndrome will tell them it's all about to come crashing down. And you will never hear Kyle Field quieter than if that game starts to get away from them. The pressure will just let the air out of them so fast because it's the thing that they're dreading all the time. And it just becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. If they go into that Texas game with a little bit less at stake, it helps them.
To that point, yeah, I mean, they would have a lot less pressure. But I saw this stat last month when they were 7-1. And every single time since the 21st century that they've started 7-1, they have not finished with 10 wins. So ever since then, I'm fully on the A&M will go 9-4 train. So I'm just going to ride that one. Whether that means they beat Auburn, lose to Texas, then lose the bowl game. I just think, like to Ian's point, like the one time they had a great season in recent history with Jimbo when they went 9-1, they couldn't get that 10th win, right, because of COVID. So I just think A&M is what they are. They'll always be kind of there. Then they collapse. I mean, Jimbo was 7-2 in 2021. They finished 8-4. It's just A&M will lose one of these games. Let's just hope it's the Texas one.
The final game of the SEC schedule for the evening is Vanderbilt at LSU. Starts at 7:45 again Eastern. You can watch that on the SEC network. Both teams are 6-4. Vanderbilt is bowl eligible and coming off a massive rest week, almost 2 weeks. And the question really here is, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Justin, is can Kelly keep LSU engaged? I mean, they were definitely in the hunt there for a little bit, and now not at all. So do you think he can keep the locker room?
Oh, that's a good question because there's some animosity in that place right now. The offense isn't clicking. The defense isn't stopping anybody, and that's just not LSU ball that we've been used to for the last 15, 20 years. And it's almost surprising that Brian Kelly's teams aren't more physically imposing. But I was actually talking to an LSU source yesterday who said that there's the last 2 years of recruiting classes on defense, none of them have panned out or developed. And goes, that's why you're kind of seeing the problems they're having now and that they're going to have to go really portal heavy, especially on the defensive line in the offseason. And so Vanderbilt's sneaky. I mean, you got Pavia, like that dude is competitive. They're going to come with their A game. Like Vanderbilt still in their mind has stuff to play for. And LSU, if they underestimate Vandy at all, it could make it interesting, but it's in Death Valley and it's at night. And I just, as much as Diego wears that Superman cape, Brian Kelly's got a bar of kryptonite in the stall, and then that's not going to change. I think LSU wins. I don't think it'll be handed. I think it'll be close, but LSU's probably going to pull that one out.
The line is 7.5 with an over/under of 53.5. Any contrarian opinions there, Ian?
No, but I'm hoping that Pavia saves his last big effort for the Tennessee game. Isn't that the concluding game of the year?
You know he will.
If he can beat Tennessee, then once again, Texas can lose to Kentucky. But if they beat Texas A&M, that's one other team in the SEC that gets a third loss. And if Tennessee loses to Pavia, That's another team with a third loss. And then Texas is assured of a playoff spot.
Anything there, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think LSU's got to win, right? Just based off their last home performance.
Yeah.
But we thought LSU would have some juice in the building 2 weeks ago, and then Bama just absolutely took the soul out of them. Vanderbilt is such an enigma. I really don't know what to think about them this season. You know, they beat Alabama, biggest win in program history, but they might still finish 6-6. Not if Diego Pavia has something to say about it. Again, as Ian says, let's hope they bring their A game against Tennessee. But LSU, I mean, the thing is they suck against quarterback run. That's something to think about. That option defense has been terrible. So it's one of those games where it'll be like, who has more to play for? Probably Vanderbilt. But LSU's got better athletes, and you'd think they kind of have to win. I would not bet that game. I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole, but should be interesting to see what happens with BK out there since he left Notre Dame for that, and now Notre Dame's actually doing better, similar to Lincoln Riley's situation.
We are going to see you tomorrow morning for the roundtable. That's going to give you all of our predictions of the Texas-Kentucky game. We really appreciate you being here today. Be sure to join us at InsideTexas.com. There's, so much coverage of all of this. And as recruiting is heating up, I know our staff over there with Justin, with Coach, with Eric, and with Joe is just kind of on fire. You guys are absolutely killing it. So we want to thank you guys so much for being here, and we will see you tomorrow for our roundtable.